October 1597, the Myeongnyang Strait. The name itself means the roaring channel, and it's about to earn its reputation in blood. The water here doesn't just flow, it screams, churned into a violent, frothing frenzy by jagged underwater ridges. On the horizon, the sun glints off the lacquered armor of a nightmare. 333 Japanese ships. A forest of masts carrying thousands of samurai, bloodied by years of brutal civil war, closing in like a suffocating fist. Their mission is a simple, terrifying decree: the total annihilation of the Joseon Dynasty. Standing against them is a ghost. Admiral Yi Sun-sin stands on the deck of a single ship. Behind him, there are only 12 more. The odds aren't just impossible, they're a death sentence. 13 against 333. No reinforcements are coming. The king has already ordered Yi to abandon the sea and hide with the land forces. But Yi's response, carved into the annals of history, remains chillingly simple: I still have 12 ships. If you want to discover how a disgraced commander tortured by his own government and left with a shattered fleet executed the most calculated naval massacre in human history, turning a narrow channel into a graveyard for an empire, then listen closely. This is not just a story of survival, it's a masterclass in strategic annihilation. The story begins 5 years earlier, in 1592. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the great unifier of Japan, looks across the sea with a hunger that no land could satisfy. He doesn't just want Korea, he wants Ming China. He envisions a new Asian empire with himself at its divine center. The Japanese invasion, known as the Imjin War, was a biblical plague. 200,000 samurai landed on the Bizen coast. These were not mere soldiers. They were veterans of the Sengoku Jidai, the Warring States period, masters of the katana and the arquebus. Within weeks, Seoul had fallen. The Joseon court fled north, shivering in the cold. On land, the Japanese were unstoppable, but they had one Achilles heel: logistics. They needed a constant stream of rice, gunpowder, and fresh men from their home islands. And this is where the shadow fell. Admiral Yi Sun-sin had spent the early years of the war systematically disemboweling the Japanese supply lines. Using his revolutionary turtle ships, which were iron-roofed, spike-covered monsters that breathed smoke and fire, he won every single engagement. He never lost a ship, not one, but in the world of power, brilliance breeds envy. In a classic display of the paradox of greatness, Yi's success was his undoing. Corrupt officials and the paranoid King Seonjo feared his growing popularity. They didn't see a savior, they saw a threat to the throne. They framed him for desertion and treason. Yi Sun-sin, the man who saved the seas, was stripped of his rank, dragged to Seoul in chains, and subjected to brutal torture. They broke his body, but they could not touch his mind. While Yi sat in a damp cell, his rival, Won Gyun, took command of the navy. In a single afternoon of sheer incompetence, at the Battle of Myeongnyang, Won Gyun led the entire Korean fleet, nearly 170 ships, directly into a Japanese trap. They were massacred. Only 12 ships escaped the carnage. The king, realizing the Japanese navy was now free to sail around the peninsula and crush the capital from the sea, reinstated Yi in a fit of desperation. He found a navy that no longer existed. He found 12 broken ships and a handful of terrified, starving sailors. He was a commander of ghosts. Yi Sun-sin knew he couldn't win an open battle. He had to turn the Japanese strength, their overwhelming numbers, into their greatest liability. He chose the Myeongnyang Strait. Myeongnyang is a geographic anomaly. The channel is narrow, barely 300 meters wide at its throat, and the current changes direction with terrifying force every few hours. It reaches speeds of 11 knots, faster than most ships of the era could even sail. He also relied on the technical superiority of his vessels. Unlike the Japanese sekibune, which were built from light fir wood for speed and boarding, the Korean Panokseon were heavy, stable, and built from thick, seasoned oak. They featured a flat hull that allowed them to turn on a dime in turbulent water. Most importantly, they were designed as floating gun platforms. While the Japanese focused on getting close to use their blades, Yi focused on range. He had reinforced his 13 ships, raising the bulwarks to protect against musket fire and positioning his heavy cannons to fire in a continuous rolling thunder. He wasn't just sailing ships, he was positioning mobile walls. At 8 o'clock in the morning, the Japanese fleet, led by the arrogant Kurushima Michifusa, enters the strait. They see Yi's lone flagship standing in the middle of the channel like a solitary sentinel. The other 12 Korean ships, gripped by paralyzing fear, are hovering in the distance, ready to flee at the first sight of blood. By 9 o'clock, the Japanese charge. Kurushima assumes he can simply swarm the lone ship, but the current is against them. They are crammed into a bottleneck, their 333 ships colliding with one another in the churning water. Yi's flagship unleashes a localized hell. Cannons fire in a continuous rotation, the iron balls shattering Japanese hulls. The Panokseon's height means Japanese musketeers can't reach the Korean decks, while Korean archers rain fire downward. By 11 o'clock, the pressure reaches a breaking point. Yi's flagship is surrounded by dozens of enemy vessels. He's fighting alone, for nearly 2 hours, a single oak fortress against a sea of lacquer and steel. He orders his crew to play the drums of war louder. He hangs a banner of a tiger. He knows the secret of the strait. The tide is about to turn. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the miracle occurs. The current of the roaring channel shifts with a violent surge. Suddenly, the Japanese ships are being sucked backward, crashing into their own reinforcements. Chaos erupts. The 12 reluctant Korean ships, seeing their admiral still standing amidst the wreckage of dozens of Japanese boats, finally find their courage. They join the line, forming a wall of oak and iron across the strait. By 3 o'clock, the slaughter becomes systematic. Kurushima Michifusa is killed by a concentrated cannon blast. His body is hauled from the frothing water, beheaded, and displayed on the prow of Yi's ship. The sight shatters what remains of Japanese morale. The Japanese are trapped in a washing machine of wood and iron. The Korean cannons, using heavy iron-tipped bolts, rip through the thin Japanese ships like paper. 31 Japanese warships are sunk outright. Dozens more are disabled, their crews drowning in the very channel they sought to conquer. The rest, seeing their elite vanguard vaporized, flee in total disorder. When the smoke finally cleared over the Myeongnyang Strait, the tally was so lopsided it bordered on the divine. The Japanese lost 31 ships and thousands of elite samurai. The Koreans lost 0 ships, only 2 men died on the flagship. The Battle of Myeongnyang didn't just win a fight. It saved a civilization. The Japanese Navy never recovered its nerve. Without a secure sea route, their land invasion stalled, eventually leading to their total withdrawal from the peninsula. Admiral Yi Sun-sin would eventually die in the final battle of the war, the Battle of Myeongnyang, famously telling his subordinates not to let his death be known, so the men wouldn't lose heart. Myeongnyang proves that history is not decided by the size of the army, but by the weight of the strategy. It's a lesson in innovation under pressure, a mastering geography when you lack the numbers. It shows the power of forcing a giant into a bottleneck where his size becomes his tomb. The shadow of the roaring channel still hangs over naval history, a reminder that even when the world stands against you 30-1, if you have the right wall and the right will, the tide will eventually turn in your favor. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more stories of impossible victories.